With the recent release of episode 4 of The Last of Us TV series, a lot of us fans felt a sense of relief knowing that this episode was way better than the controversial episode 3. And on top of that, many people felt that this episode was actually one of the best of the series so far. I sent my top generals to investigate and see whether this episode was worth watching. Is episode 4 as good as some say it is? Let's jump into it.
What's up, guys? This is Frank, joined with Haki for our Last of Us Season 2, Episode 4 review. I think it's called Day 1. And, if you're new here, we're going to do a non-spoiler discussion. We'll talk about the good, the bad, give our final verdicts on the episode, and then go into a spoiler discussion from a gamer's perspective. So let's just kind of go right into it, Haki. You weren't here last time, so I'm actually going to let you go first. What was the good that you liked in this episode?
Yeah, man, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I think just great scenes throughout this episode, and scenes with some infected, which we'll get into, and then just, scenes between main characters, some real strong acting scenes, good writing scenes. I think the environment we've talked about pretty much throughout the entire series here. The environment's just been great. How Seattle looks, how everything just looks, real battered, obviously, where infected and humans are clashing as well. And then I think the introduction to Isaac, which we'll definitely get into, I think he's a cool character, and I like what I've seen so far.
Yeah. And listen, I'll piggyback. I think you've kind of nailed the good for me. You weren't here last week. We talked about it off air, but we felt like last week was a real kind of bummer for us. And this time around, again, not going to dive into exactly what happens, but we get infected here. We get confrontations here, and just even better, like you said, conversations between different main characters. I thought Ellie was better in this one than I've kind of felt from her. Definitely last week. Going into this one, Dina continues to shine for me, and the introduction to Isaac was a big one. They did a lot more showing us than telling us this episode, which I do like. They did do some of that. We'll get into that in spoilers, but a lot more than last week, which was a big boost for me. And with the good, we'll talk about the bad. And for me, I'll go first on this one, Haki. Pacing. You're going to probably hear this issue throughout this. We've kind of talked about it so far this season. Pacing is going to be continue to be a thorn in the side of this show. And things are moving at such a fast pace. There's not a lot to dwell on. And one of the bigger concerns that I have is not so much of where they kind of cut off on this season, which again, this is episode 4. You got 5, 6, and 7. There's 3 left of this part 1 of it's season 2 going to season 3, but it's like part 1 of the game. And then part 2 of the game is followed up by next one. And there's just not enough time to marinate things. We knew this would be a problem kind of going in. They got away with it in season 1 because to me, there wasn't as many elements to season 1 that they had to deviate time to. This time around, there's a lot. And there was so much discussion about, we're going to get more in depth about different characters, some more side stories. I don't see how that's possible. I really don't, because you got to move at a fast pace to get to a certain point. Where is that in-depth conversation going to happen next season? Because this one feels like we're moving quickly here, and we need to, because there's a lot that has to happen in 7 episodes if I think on where it's going to end in this first part. But Aki, pacing to me, it continues to be a thorn. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. But for me, as someone who didn't really play the game, which, I have a different perspective than both you and Marsman, I'm still a little confused with the wolves, or the WLF, right? And the Seraphites, I think they're called. And then Isaac called them the Scars. So I'm not really too sure about who these factions are, although I think what I've seen in this episode, it was, pretty good, but still a little confusing from someone who, has never played the game before. So that was my bad for this episode, at least.
And it's a great point, right? So they call each other by different names. One likes to be called Seraphite. They call him Scar as more of a derogatory thing, similar both ways, right? So, but that's a great point. You don't have that experience with the game that I do. Be more blunt here, right? I mean, they like to be blunt about a lot of things in this show. They don't like to, they like to call it in a straight linear arrow. But with this one, again, you got 2 episodes now where they kind of beat around the bush. I think they did a better job in this one compared to last week, but still, like Hockey just said, leaving, it still creates a little bit of confusion for the audience. And so with that, let's go into our final verdicts. And you know what, Hockey, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What is your grade? What is your overall view of this episode?
Hey, dude, I don't know, how high you're going to be, but I thought this was, one of the best episodes I've seen so far. I'm at an 8.5. So I really liked, again, seeing Isaac get, his intro. Very interesting character. And then, again, everything that I said about the scenes and, seeing that infected, which we didn't, see any last episode. This episode really, really did it for me. And again, those scenes that we will get into, the one-on-one acting scenes, and then just again that intro and what happens right away almost. It's very interesting. And yeah, man, this is one of my favorite episodes, probably 8.5.
Yeah, I'm similar to you. A little bit lower though, so I'm at a 7.5, and I do think this is way better than it was last week. Those that watched it, I know I got some people upset about my score, but I do think this is way better than last week. But I don't find it as an overall episode better than episode 2, which I had at an 8. So I just think slightly below that, but overall much better conflicts, infected that we get. I think much better dynamics between our main characters, and the intro to Isaac is definitely a highlight in this episode. I think they introduced him, which they did very poorly, of the scars last week, and like kind of very milquetoast of the WLF as a whole. But for Isaac, it was definitely a home run for me.
Right.
All right, guys, that was our non-spoiler review. Now we're going to dive into our spoiler discussion. If you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button. Let us know your thoughts on The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 4 in the comments below. And now, to the spoiler discussion. All right, Hockey, let's talk about our spoiler discussion. And like we've done from previous weeks, we'll just hit some main components here. We're not going to go line by line, scene by scene. We'll talk about some of the big moments that happened and our thoughts on it. And again, there was some changes done in the show that is different from the game. Some overall stuff happens similarly, but the details definitely get changed a little bit. And then the first one I do want to talk about is Isaac. You start off right out of the gate, kind of a flashback to when the quarantine first going on and Fedra is running things in Seattle. And you see a group of kind of soldiers. Again, this is in the post-apocalypse, so I don't know what kind of soldiers that they are, but that they work for Fedra. They're talking about how they kind of treat the people, and they start calling them voters. And one of these younger soldiers asks them, well, why do you call these people voters? And then Isaac kind of interrupts, who's the sergeant of this platoon, and says, because we took away their rights. So we call them voters as kind of a mocking thing. Now, a nice little interesting tidbit. The guy who was telling the story was from Drake and Josh, and that was Josh that was in that. It was freaking hilarious to see him in there swearing like crazy. Very not Drake and Josh like, but it was pretty funny to see him. But Isaac then, they run up, there's this blockade in front of them, and then they see a bunch of, they think maybe it could be civilians, they think it could be WLF, but then Isaac says, let me go talk to them, because every time we do this as a group, there's usually a confrontation. So he comes out there alone. He tells the young soldier to come with him to learn something, he says. And then he talks to this woman, and he's like, are you Isaac? And then he says, are you, what do they call her? Like Hanaran or something like that?
I didn't really even understand.
And then all of a sudden, he walks back to the truck. He's got a couple grenades in his holster. He pulls out the pins and throws it in and shuts the door, and it blows up the Fedra agents. One of them tries to get out of the tank, and he guns them down. And then he walks up to the lady, shakes hands, and then he tells the young soldier, now you can make a choice. And then the scene cuts. Right from that, I really liked it. I thought it was a really cool scene into Isaac, who it shows you a couple things. Number one, he was a sergeant in Fedra. And then number two, he was sick of Fedra's. Again, you could tell by the way when they were talking about the story about how they handled the people that they're looking over, he wasn't into it at all. And so it kind of showed him that, like, I'm sick of this. I want to be a part of something different. And that's, to me, was a really strong introduction. So, Hockey, what were your thoughts on the scene, your intro to Isaac? Just kind of like showing how the WLF kind of overtook Fedra in this moment.
Right, dude, you just hit it right there, man. What an intro. What a strong intro. I thought just right from the get-go. First, yeah, the Drake and Josh being in there, cursing up a storm, telling the story. I thought that was very funny. But yeah, dude, as soon as Isaac got out of that truck, I knew, something was going to go down. And what a really cool written scene. Very emotional, the scene, like you said, man, he chucks a grenade in the back of the truck, after telling the soldier that asked the question to get out, blows everyone up, kills that last guy. It was a really cool scene, well written, well acted, and it just starts his character development, which I think hopefully, he's a cool looking character, so hopefully that development continues to go, and we see a pretty cool character throughout.
And I would love more in depth, and that's kind of what the thing that scares me is who knows how much we get of that. But a really strong start. And then it goes to Ellie and Dina kind of traveling it, get into Seattle, looking for kind of clues on where to kind of go next. They run up a bunch of dead bodies. With Fedra, they do identify an WLF tower, building, right? And Dina, very helpful here. Kind of Ellie's the emotional one. Dina's the smart one. And Dina's saying, why we can't, they're up on a hill, they'll see us coming, which was smart. Again, this is like little things they're trying to show, like, hey, I know it's fantasy, but it's not that wildly fantasy. Like, we're just going to run up on a horse and kind of take over the tower. Like, we got to go at night on foot. Yeah, like those kind of things I appreciate. Dina much more helpful in the show than she is in the game. So that continues there. But then it dives into something that was again, back to Isaac, who's sitting in this kitchen, right? And he's interrogating a scar. And so this was, again, a really strong scene, but it was hilarious. Is a few episodes I keep talking about, show me the gruesome stuff, show me the unedited stuff, right? I've been talking on this show. So they show Isaac telling a story on how he wanted to be a cook one day, and like he was counting down the days that he can collect his pension, and he wanted these pans that he had that he had hanging up. And he's like, it's like kind of ironic that I finally get to own one, but not the way I planned. And he just talks about why he talks about one certain pan versus another is that one retains heat better, and he starts heating up one of the pans. And then you see a scar here, and he's butt naked. He's fully naked, and he's beat the crap out. He's bloodied. It's pretty gruesome looking scene. They're obviously beating the hell out of him to get information. And they're trying to look for information here, and he's got his schlong out and everything. Like, it's unedited here. So they tell me, like they didn't hold back on this one. So he comes up to him. He tells him put out his hand, and he burns him with it, right? And he's trying to get information, but the details between them, I think, was to me the best part. And it's talking kind of the confrontation between the WLF and the Seraphites, or the Scars, or what the WLF calls them. And he talks about how the Seraphites killed a kid, shot him with an arrow, and how they teach, and then the Scars coming right back. And I'm like, hey, you kill our kids. And he was like, well, you train them to try to kill us. And then the Seraphites say something even more interesting. He says, you broke the truce. That's what started it. And that's where you're getting the little details. They did, in my opinion, a terrible job last week where they showed the wandering group and then they get gunned down and nothing, like everyone's assuming it's the WLF. But now you're getting actual details on their confrontation. And then Isaac is talking about how they have this prophet that they know that it's just a normal person? And he's saying, no, it's more than that. And he tells them that they're going to lose. Like, this was the best part. The Seraphite tells them they're going to lose. And he says, how so? He says, every single day a wolf leaves your group and joins us. No Seraphite leaves, at least alive. And so, he goes to grab the pan again, and the guy just pulls out his hand. He doesn't even have to ask him, just to show his loyalty to the Scars. And so Isaac then takes out his gun, just blasts him. Besides obviously the naked man, really strong scene. I think this was a really good scene. It gives you details. It shows the conflict that they didn't do last week. They did it this time around. And to me, they deserve kudos for this. Again, boosting Isaac, boosting the Scars. You could tell that they are loyal, that this is kind of a religious cult that they're in. And it brings to me, if I already know about both groups, but if I was outside the group, I felt like this is an intriguing dynamic between these two groups. I want to know more. Haki, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think we got the full Master Chief effect, in this episode. Some
cheeks are out there.
Yeah, some
and
cheeks
full frontal.
were
not
there,
cheeks.
right?
We got full frontal.
Right, yeah, full moon, right. Yeah, I mean, it was like you said, man, pretty strong scene. You can see the loyalty with the Seraphites. Again, I think that they started to explain, like you said, they did start to explain, what was going on between them. Again, it was a pretty brutal scene, and I kind of liked, seeing that brutality.
Yes.
We saw it with Joel a few weeks ago, right? But this one was pretty brutal. So I like this, and it really shows you, man, that Isaac is a badass, and he'll pretty much do anything to get what he wants, So, but it is pretty interesting what the Seraphite said, that every day that one of your guys comes to us, and we never become a wolf. So very interesting there. Can't wait to see what comes of it.
Yeah, and it's almost like they keep, because you could tell like they were trying to bash each other's hypocrisies. Like, you kill kids, well, you kill kids as well, and they try to justify it in their own means. Which again, it's showing the flaws between these two different groups, and I think that's a good thing. As we continue going forward, then it runs into, after the interrogation, Dean and Ellie going after the tower and at night, and they end up getting into the tower and then seeing a bunch of dead wolves, right? And none of them they can identify is this part of the group or not, but they see a bunch of arrows stabbed in one. Then they get into kind of the main room and they see him again, an ode to the game here. And I didn't mention they did another ode earlier when they found a music shop where Ellie started playing the guitar. That was a nice, again, little ode. I'm trying to move things quickly, so but I did want to give a shout out. That was where she plays the guitar to Dina. That's part of the game too, which was a nice little nugget there. But when they get into this main room of the tower, they see all these wolves hung with their intestines pulled out. And this is, again, another reference into the game, which to me, again, was really another strong scene. Now, how do they handle it a little bit differently from the game, which again, that it brings in part of the gameplay because you have to deal with both, but they're trying to make it a show. They show that the scars got there and did the damage already. They moved up on them, and then backup was called. They find, a walkie-talkie, and they tell them that they're on their way. So then all of a sudden the backup comes in. And I do like this scenery, like Haki talked about, where it's not just Ellie and Dina, who are both smaller women, going Rambo, right? They didn't come out and start, blasting away like Scarface and, like they're flipping dudes over and like, doing crazy stuff. They actually had to stealth their way out, right? To me, that is a more realistic and a stronger scene. They stealth their way out. Ellie finds, because Dina's kind of cornered, to get up the stairs. One of the guys follows her up there, and then she hides behind the door. The guy's walking in, does the Batman, check the corners, rookie. He doesn't do that. Ellie comes behind him and tackles him, and then she jumps on his back. And again, to me, it's the little details, right? A lot of people were upset, I know, in episode 1 when like Ellie did the arm bar to the real jacked guy. This time she just jumps on his back and is choking him, right? Then another soldier walks in, he's trying to shoot, but Ellie's got him, covered. So the guy doesn't want to shoot his friend. Dina comes behind that guy and blasts his head, and then Ellie stabs the guy in the neck. So again, a much more realistic way. They didn't go Rambo, they didn't go guns blazing. Will we probably see some of that? Yes, but I do like how they brought stealth in, being sneaky. That's where kind of the game comes into it, and that was a great part. They escape out of that and then have to crawl through a tunnel away from some other people. Aki, thoughts on this?
Yeah, dude, this again, like you said, man, definitely one of the strongest scenes. Super realistic, right? They were sneaking around. They weren't going to go Rambo because they couldn't, and if they did, it would have seemed a little fake. So definitely liked how they approached this one. And yeah, listen, man, these girls are getting kills, man. They're getting notches on their belt. Ellie knows how to grapple. She's choking the guy, stabs him, and then Dina comes through and smokes that other guy. I mean, it was a really cool scene. Again, well acted, well put together, well written scene, and these just continued throughout. So a great scene for me.
Yep. And then they get into the transit, right? The subway. Soldiers know they crawled into the subway. They go down there, and then all of a sudden, now you're hearing the infected. They threw a couple flares to try to create some light. One of the flares goes onto the fungus, and now the fungus kind of gets notified, hey, there's people in here. Now you're starting to hear, and all of a sudden, a horde comes. Clears out the wolves. Ellie and Dina smartly jumping into the subway, and then you have a really strong scene. Again, quick escapes, them coming through, gunning guys who break through the wall. They have to jump up through the kind of the roof of the subway. And And to me, another strong scene. Got some gunplay. You got some, again, tension building. Then they try to escape and try to bust down the gate. Ellie gets through, but Dina kind of gets stuck. It's rusted. So there's an infected that comes after Dina, and Ellie puts her arm in the way and gets bit. And obviously, us as the fans who have been watching it know that Ellie's immune, but Dina does not know that. And so she's shocked to see what happened. Ellie gets bit. Dina shoots the infected. They escape and then find a church. And so now they get to the church, or I think it's not really a church. It's more of a place where they do plays. Like, it's like a Broadway place. So it's not really a church, but then they get there, things cool down, but then Dina pulls her gun on Ellie for obvious reasons, right? Dina doesn't know that she's immune. And so Ellie's trying to explain herself. Dina's saying, don't make this harder than it is. Like, stop talking. And Ellie's like, she's trying to calm her down. You can tell Dina really doesn't want to do this. But Ellie says, I'm going to sit in that chair over there. You sit over there. And if I turn, you shoot me, but I'm not going to turn. It's just going to be me. And then you get the scene again. Next day, Dina hasn't slept. She's pretty much just standing there with the light on her, with the gun pulled, realizes that she is immune. And then this is the part that gets a little bit funny to me, because all of this, the romantic stuff, doesn't happen at this exact moment, right? You just kind of see the romantic stuff happen before this, which kind of, how they change it to me, this one doesn't really matter because it ends up being at the same road anyway. So Dina tells Ellie that she's pregnant. Then they have a love scene, right? So they do a love scene there. They give you a strong hint of what's going to happen. I don't think it's strong of a hint to season 1, episode 3, but obviously you get the picture, right? They have a love scene there. They talk about, Dina talks about how, she's felt that she's been bi for a long time, but her mother did not want, they kind of forced her to be straight. She wanted to make it work with Jesse, but in her heart, when she thought Ellie was going to die, she realized that, there was going to be a world without Ellie. And she didn't want to, again, because Ellie asked, why do this now? Why tell me now? Why, show your affection to me now? And it's because she's like, I thought you were going to die. And like, I didn't, thinking about a world without you has made me think like, let me stop with the BS and tell you the honest feeling. So that's what ends up happening there. Then we hear the radio go off, which is what, Dina took the walkie-talkie from the radio tower from WLF, and it's talking about how there was a confrontation between the Scars. The Scars wounded a bunch of wolves, and how they're bringing them to a hospital, Lakeside, and that Nora, they said, make sure Nora's prepared. And so Nora rings a bell, right? Oh, Nora's one of those people. We got to get there. So that's pretty much how that episode ends. They're pointing, okay, it's in that direction. They have a map. And then, Ellie says, hey, you can stay here. Things are different now. You're pregnant. Now, I didn't know that before. You can stay here. I'll go alone. And Dina says, we're going to go together. And that's kind of the biggest events here with that. So really strong train station scene for me. The confrontation, I think, was a good one. Dina, to me, has been really good. She has been really good. I think actually the best character so far this season for me, which is a bit surprising. But I think she's been really strong with her acting. And to me, this was kind of a real highlight for her. But still, really good infected scenes there, train station scenes. The love interest, if you are shocked by this, you're not shocked if you played the game. And they've hinted at this before, right? I mean, this has been a strong hint for 3 episodes now, including the kissing scene in the episode early on in the season. So I don't think anyone should be real shocked by this. But I do understand, again, the pacing. It is fast. Things don't have a lot of time to marinate. It's like, boom, I'm immune. Boom, I'm pregnant. Boom, we like each other, right? All in the same scene. So there's not a ton. I can understand that, like, this is moving fast, and it is. Hakif, thoughts on this last part of the episode?
Yeah, man. Listen, the train scene, I think it was probably the best scene, maybe one of the best zombie scenes we've seen. I know, obviously, we saw a great zombie scene 2 episodes ago, but this scene right here, fantastic. Inside the train, then having to jump out of the train. Very, very cool scene. I wish the wolves put up a little bit more of a fight, but they just got absolutely overran by, a ton of infected, which totally fine. Yeah, then we get to the scene where Ellie sticks her arm out. I thought that was pretty cool. We see, Dina, like you said, man, probably one of the best actors of this whole series so far. Really take it on her shoulders. And it even made Ellie, do well.
They brought her up, right? It was really good performance by Dina.
Yeah, I thought it was well written, well acted by both girls, so very good. And then the love scene, HBO, they got to do what they got to do. But yeah, I think just all the way to the end, again, that environment that we're seeing, they're looking out and you can see, the destruction, you can see the nature overtaking the city. So hopefully the next episode really dives into, the dynamic between the wolves and the Seraphites. That would be awesome. But I really like this episode, man. It was probably one of my favorite ones so far.
Yeah, I mean, Hockey, you convinced me to go up a little bit, but I'll stay at my score. I still liked it. Again, to me, that is the second best episode that I've rated so far outside of episode 2. And I agree with it. I think that's where it is. Compared to some of the season 1, I probably liked some more in season 1 episodes than this one. But nonetheless, what an improve! You go from last week to this week, it's a jump. It's not a smidge forward. It is a jump forward, and that's what we hope to continue, right? But again, we know what the problems that they have. There's some that can be fixed, but the pacing one, unless they just announce that the show got extended even longer, it's just that pacing is going to be a problem for the entire run of this. That's pretty much where I'm convinced that. Yeah, but what are your thoughts? What was your favorite moment in The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 4? What was your least favorite moment? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button if you haven't already to help support the channel, and think about becoming a member of the Marsman crew for some extended perks. With that, guys, at the end screen, you will see last week's review if you want to check out what our thoughts on Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3 at the end screen. But with that, this is Frank and Aki from Marsman Gaming signing off. Game on.